Good afternoon and welcome to Wired's live living room sessions. Today is our 18th episode, and it happens to be today that I have a technical glitch for the first time. So, if the angle that I'm coming at is a bit awkward, it's because I'm coming from off my phone and the show must go on. So, let's get on with today's topic. If you've missed any of our sessions to date, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel, click subscribe, start viewing. On Tuesday, we enjoyed a lively discussion with CPR Clark and Tracy Farnum, TV and radio presenter, producer, and influencer. And they talked about how members of the creative industry could use their influence in a variety of ways to drive change and climate resilience. If you've missed it, remember it's as easy as click, subscribe, and watch. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Kiesha Farnum, and I am from Walker's Institute for Regenerative Research, Education, and Design. And we are pleased to bring you this series in collaboration with the Caribbean Permaculture Research Institute, powered by the Inter-American Development Bank. We will be continuing for the month of June to explore the topics of regenerative agriculture, climate change, building biodiversity, and renewable energy, every Thursday and every Tuesday at 1 p.m. till the end of the month. Today, we're going to discuss tree planting. It may sound like a very simple activity, but it is actually quite complex and has far-reaching positive impacts on small island developing states such as Barbados, and can also expand across the globe. Today, I'm happy to have with me Dr. Chelston Brathwaite, the man leading the government of Barbados' We Planting initiative, as we talk everything trees. The goal? To plant 1 million trees across Barbados. Dr. Brathwaite is the former ambassador of Barbados to the People's Republic of China. Prior to this, he has served Barbados and the field of agriculture for over 50 years. Dr. Brathwaite has worked with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the Faculty of Agriculture of the University of the West Indies, and the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, ICA, culminating as the 9th Director General of ICA from 2002 to 2010. In this capacity, he became the first Barbadian, the first West Indian, and the first person of African descent to achieve this position in the 70-year history of the Institute. So as you can see, there is definitely no better person to lead this initiative. On the celebration of the 37th anniversary of the independence of Barbados, Dr. Brathwaite was awarded the Companion of Honor, the second highest honor available to Barbadians, for his outstanding contribution to agricultural development nationally, regionally, and internationally. Dr. Brathwaite, it is definitely a pleasure to have you with us today.
Good afternoon, Kiesha, and good afternoon to friends, families, and colleagues.
Yes.
Let me begin you for inviting me to participate in your wide session. I'm delighted to be here.
And it is indeed a pleasure to have you. 1 million trees starting 2020, that is no small task. But I think if anybody is up to this task, it's going to be you, Dr. Brathwaite. I'm really excited to get into today's discussion because we're going to be looking at how and why we should be doing, how we're going to plant 1 million trees, why we should be planting 1 million trees, and how this ambitious goal can build a stronger and healthier Barbados. So when we look at that commitment to plant 1 million trees, that commitment was established when by the government of Barbados, and how does that fit into the overall target of net zero by 2030?
Thank you again for the opportunity. Let me begin by saying that the year 2015 was an important year for global cooperation. In that year, 186 countries of the world gathered together in Paris to sign the landmark agreement called the Paris Climate Accord.
Yes.
The first time in the history of the world that so many countries got together to sign a single agreement. And this Paris Agreement built on previous agreements such as the Kyoto Protocol, the Conference of Montreal, Agenda 21, and other environmental initiatives that had taken place around the world in the last 20-25 years. In that same year, at the United Nations in New York, the countries of the world again got together and agreed to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as the basis for promoting global prosperity and peace. And among the 17 goals of the agenda was goal number 13. That goal on climate action agreed that countries must take urgent action to combat climate change and to regulate emissions and promote renewable energy. These two global agreements in 2015 led to the United Nations Climate Action Summit in New York in 2019, where the United Nations agreed to review the progress made toward the achievement of the goals of the agreement signed in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
In that meeting in 2019, Barbados was represented by our Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, who attended the UN Summit in 2019, and in her address to the summit, she presented the case for greater and more immediate and decisive action on climate change as it affected the reality of small island developing states. And she made the point that it was time for the global community to work together and to take concrete action to halt and probably to reverse climate change. She indicated that Barbados would lead by example and will promote a carbon neutral economy by 2030 and will plant 1 million trees to assist in reducing the impact of climate change. So the idea, the challenge, the project to plant 1 million trees in Barbados was announced at the United Nations in 2019. On her
Wow.
return to Barbados from the UN summit, the Prime Minister established a committee of representatives from the Ministry of the Environment and National Beautification and the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security to implement the planting of 1 million trees in Barbados. And I was asked to chair the committee. And I was
Wow.
honored and
Yes.
pleased to be given that responsibility. So, in a nutshell, Kiesha, this is the origin of the plan to plant 1 million trees in Barbados.
Yeah. So
But
so
we
just
understand.
to sorry, I don't mean to interject, but I just want to make sure that I have the timelines correctly. This has actually been 5 years in the making, and it is the part that Barbados is playing as part of a global initiative. So for the
Yes,
everyday person on the street, this is not something that just popped up recently. This is something that has been years in making, and it is the opportunity for Barbados as a small island developing state to play its role in meeting overall global targets for climate change. And so the entire process that we've gone through is really Barbados definitely punching above its weight on the global scale, and showing that we are prepared to stand up and to fight climate change along with the developing nations of the country, of the globe.
correct, correct. And to
Yes,
take responsibility and to
exactly.
take its responsibility and global commitment seriously. As
Yes,
you know,
yeah,
there are many times commitments are made and there's no follow up. Here's a case of
exactly.
Barbados saying, we have committed, we have agreed, we have signed the Paris Accord, and these are the actions that we will take to comply with our
Yes,
commitment. And the
we've
tree
signed an
project is
agreement and we're
just
gonna follow
one
through.
leg of the initiative, because you will no doubt remember that Barbados has also taken the decision to be a zero carbon country by 2030 with respect to emissions, supporting
Yes.
a brand initiative in renewable energy.
Yeah. Well, in looking at what that means, that definitely there's a whole bunch of steps that need to take place for that to happen. And so, of course, we've been talking on the show about the use of renewable energy in terms of economic stability, the use of renewable energy in terms of as a response to climate change and to build climate resilience. But also within this context, the use of renewable energy to meet that target. But as part of that, it also takes into consideration this element of planting trees. And
Yes.
as we go along in the conversation, I think persons are going to clearly understand that meeting that 2030 net zero target, it's not just about expanding renewable energy, but it's looking at our agricultural systems, the way that we do agriculture, and the way that we use the most natural resource that we can possibly ever have, which is trees, to meet that target of net zero in 2030.
Yeah, I agree. It is important for us to recognize that climate change is one of the most defining moments of our time.
Correct?
Recently, we have been combating the challenges of COVID, and COVID is having a significant impact on our lives and our lifestyle. But climate change is equally important in terms of ensuring the sustainability of our world and making
Yeah,
sure that our children and our grandchildren can live in a world that is healthy and peaceful. Climate
yeah,
change and combating the impact of climate change is critical to our future. So, let me tell you a little bit about what climate change has been doing to Barbados. Let
yeah,
me just say
definitely.
that over the last few decades, we have seen the impact of climate change very markedly here in our country. Increased coastal flooding and shoreline instability, increased frequency of tropical events, tropical storms, hurricanes, increased intensity of the weather, increased intensity and occurrence of drought and lack of water, and increased amounts of sargassum weed on our beaches, which
Yeah,
is having a negative effect on our tourism industry. These are visible evidence of the impact here. But generally, rising sea levels globally is a major concern. Severe water stress in many arid and semi-arid areas, decreased agricultural production is a reality. Higher world food prices have resulted from decreased agricultural production, and the world must feed 78 million people that come into our world every year. Major
yeah,
changes in productivity of critical ecosystems and even marine systems because of change in temperatures of the ocean and changes levels of nutrients in the oceans, and millions of people at risk. In the context of small island economies, we are very conscious of the fact that sea level rise can be one of our greatest threats. Maldives,
yes,
an island nation in the Indian Ocean, is already building a wall to prevent the sea coming into the land, and people from that country already relocating to other countries because of the threat of climate change. And
yeah. And the
so it
same
is
is
for
happening
us
in the
as a small
Pacific Ocean
country
too
to
as well.
understand the threat, not only in the context of vicious and violent hurricanes, but also in the context of sea level rise.
Yeah. And the thing is, for many people, they hear the numbers, they hear the science, they hear, okay, we can't go above a certain amount of degrees. Um, and it doesn't really mean anything much to them. But the things that you've just described and the indicators that you've just talked about for climate change, we see it every day. The sargassum, you can see it. The hurricanes, we feel it. And so the impact of climate change is very, very real. Um, Even if we may not understand the science behind it, or we may not understand why it is that we're using certain numbers or why certain decisions are being made, if we just look at what the impact of those of the science, I think it makes a very clear and poignant argument for making sure that we're climate resilient. And as we move into why planting 1 million trees, because I think we kind of started that element of the
Yes.
discussion with the challenges that we're having, but just looking at all the different reasons, there's so many reasons that a lot of people don't even think about as to why planting trees is important. And so why are we planting this 1 million trees?
Yes. Why are we planting 1 million trees? We're planting 1 million trees because we care about this generation, the next generation, and the future of our world. We're
Mm-hmm.
planting 1 million trees because trees remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and in so doing, reduces the incidence of global warming. We're planting 1 million trees because trees bring beauty. Trees provide food. Trees help to conserve the soil. Trees help our aquifers to be replenished with water. Trees provide shade. Trees provide food, tropical fruits. Trees provide protection from wind. Trees provide the ambiance and the beauty that is of our land. And consequently, we're planting trees for a number of reasons. The project itself has four specific objectives.
Yeah. And I know we have an image of those objectives, so it's going to come up on
Yes.
screen soon.
Our four objectives.
Yep. Here we
One,
go.
the four strategic objectives of this initiative. First, compliance with the Paris Climate Accord, which we signed, and responding as a responsible country that keeps its commitment to satisfy its international agreements.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, for promote conservation of our natural resources and biodiversity. We need to plant trees to ensure that our country conserves its biodiversity. And in conserving our biodiversity, we conserve our history, we conserve our, our legacy in terms of what Barbados means. We plant trees for social awareness and to involve the population in more responsible behavior with respect to protecting the environment. Trees for environmental protection. And that social awareness translates into building community also. Getting people together to plant trees. We find if we bring people together to plant trees, we promote social cohesion in the village and in the community. And
Yeah.
finally, we plant trees for food security. We plant trees that provide foods and nutrients for our people. For example, as you very well know, Kiesha, we import a significant amount of fruit concentrates from abroad.
Yes.
We need to produce that concentrate here in Barbados and save
Yeah.
scarce foreign exchange. We need to
Yep.
produce the concentrates for our cherries. We need to produce the concentrate for our guava. We need to produce the concentrate for apple. We need to produce the concentrate for all the things that we import. We can produce them here. And just a simple example, the Barbados cherry, for example, contains 100 times more vitamin C than the average orange. We need to produce Barbados cherry
Yeah.
and use that as part of our nutritional diet in the country to increase the availability of vitamins and to reduce the incidence of chronic non-communicable diseases by ensuring that our people eat well. So
Yeah.
trees have multiple purposes. We're planting trees for purpose. We're not just planting trees to comply with our international commitment, we're also planting trees for purpose. And every
Yeah.
tree that we plant, there is a reason for planting it.
Well, looking at listening to the plethora of things that you've just listed, it's almost 14 different reasons as to why we should be planting trees, and and the purpose behind it. I think what I really love about the way that you've dissected this approach is, we're constantly talking about having a holistic approach to any activity that we do, and that different activities, when we're looking at activities, we look at stacking functions. Two, we look at how an activity can address a multiplicity of issues. And definitely, when you break it down like this and you look at the tree planting initiative, it's not just addressing, as you said, our international commitment as a country, but it's also addressing food security. It's addressing building soil, climate change, our health as a nation, and it is definitely addressing it for future generations. So for now and for future generations. But when we look at this, there's so many great things that are happening with this one activity of planting trees, right? But we're talking about planting 1 million trees, right? And as I opened, I said, it seems like a really simple activity. You tell people, okay, well, I'm planting trees, and they're like, yeah, okay, fine, it's easy. But as you would know, as you start with the semantics of what it takes to plant, not even just 1 million trees, but a handful of trees. So, for example, with our One Tree for Every Bayesian program, which supports the government's initiative, we have also found that in trying to meet our target, it's not as easy as just putting trees in the ground, right? So let's talk about how we're going to do this. How does the replanting initiative intend to accomplish this ambitious feat?
Let me begin by saying one of the most important things we had to decide is, where are you going to plant 1 million trees?
Exactly, yes.
And trying to answer that question, we had to go back and look at Barbados and determine how are we going to proceed, because we got the mandate. Now we had to determine the how.
Yes.
Barbados is 106,000 acres. And therefore, we had to determine, where are the trees today and where should we be planting trees for the future. In doing so, we recognize that there's part of Barbados called the Scotland District, where Walkers is located, which is
Yeah.
a very important part of our country, but one that is very susceptible to landslides and where there's significant amounts of erosion. That area, for example, is 14,000 acres, which is 1/7 of the area of Barbados. If we had to plant trees on that, if it was without trees, and we had to plant trees on that land, that area could hold up to 6 million trees. So we could find places to plant trees in Barbados because we were not planting the trees as a government project, but this is a project of the government and the people. And we wanted to
Yes.
make that clear, that we wanted to ensure that the communities, that the society, that the schools, that the churches, that the private sector, that the NGOs, that all persons in Barbados were involved in this project. And therefore, when we set up our implementation committee, we invited several persons to be part of that committee. And let me say to you, in working with this initiative, we also started to work at the parish level. And we started to work with the parish organizing committees that were committed to organizing the We Gathering project. And we worked with
Ah,
them to identify areas in each parish where trees could be planted. In doing
great.
so, we identified some very interesting areas. For example, 70% of the areas that we identified for planting trees were schools. And there's a very important aspect of education that connects with the planting of trees. Planting
Mm-hmm.
trees brings to the fore the importance of recognizing our natural resources, recognizing plants, recognizing that in this fast-paced world of electronics and digital money, etc., that trees in their slow way are still the foundation of life. This, in fact, is the way we must understand our existence, because trees brings to the fore the basis of the biology, the link between nature and man. We have
Mm-hmm.
used trees over the years for building, for housing, for medical plants. I have a friend in Dominica who makes a living out of growing moringa. Moringa is a
Mm-hmm.
tree that produces a product which is known to help to balance the sugar level in the body. This is a
Yeah.
nutritional aspect of planting trees. But mahogany is one of the most beautiful trees that you can have for making furniture. I remember reading a story that Barbados mahogany was used to make a special table that was exported to England and given to Queen Victoria. And I said to the person speaking to me, maybe that table is still available in Buckingham Palace.
It probably
The
is.
fact, the fact I'm making is that trees are valuable because there's so many dimensions to them. So we have
Mm-hmm.
identified several sites in Barbados and we're working with the schools to plant trees. Just
So just
recently with the
just to be
COVID initiative, we
just to
had
be
a
clear,
little.
just to be clear, Dr. Bradford, before you go on a bit more about the schools, it's not that the tree planting, we planting, is tied finitely to the we gathering. It's that the we planting is an initiative in and of its own that was
Of
using we
course,
gathering as a vehicle to move it
as a
forward.
platform, as a
Yes,
platform.
perfect. Okay, yes. Mm-hmm.
And therefore, we continue to plant trees. In the
Yes.
COVID lockdown, even within the COVID lockdown, we were planting trees. We got a
Yes.
donation from a private company, Inotech, and we
Mm-hmm.
used that to buy trees and we distributed trees to several individuals and communities even during the lockdown period. And those trees were mainly fruit trees. We called it a
Yes.
project of fruit trees for food security. And we were distributing apple, golden apple, soursop, mango, avocado, sugar apple, a number of fruit trees that persons can plant in their backyards or in the areas that they have available to produce fruits for the future because we
Right.
import a lot of fruits into our country from abroad.
We
And
do.
so what has been happening is in the way that this project is structured, we have three elements to the project. The first
Okay.
element of the project is planting trees for soil conservation, for the gullies, to ensure that we have particular control of water, runoff, flooding, etc. You plant trees to prevent that. Secondly,
Right.
we have trees for food security, and this part is basically managed by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. And then the
Right.
third part is tree planting for community development. And in this
Right.
particular part, we work with the NGOs, with the 4-H group, with the Girl Guides, with the schools, with the churches, with the community organizations to promote the planting of trees. Some of these trees are for shade. Some of them are for conservation. Some of them are for beautification. But they all
Mm-hmm.
have a purpose. We plant trees for a purpose. And this doesn't only include trees, we also plant shrubs. Bougainvillea, crotons, etc. is all part of our mandate to use trees as the basis to promote a new cultural dimension and a new understanding of the environment by our people.
Excellent. If you're just joining us for the first time or you've just signed on, we are speaking with Dr. Chelston Brathwaite. He is the man leading the government of Barbados's We Planting initiative, and we are talking about how and why Barbados is planting 1 million trees. And so far, we've discussed the several uses of trees, and we've looked at the government strategy for rolling it out and the different categories. You were talking about the schools, Dr. Brathwaite. I don't know if you want to elaborate before I interrupted you. I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more on the importance of the schools and young people in this initiative.
Well, let me just say, as you know, Keisha, significant initiative in understanding climate change and promoting the responsibility for climate change is being led by youth around the world.
Yeah.
Greta Thunberg from Sweden has been very vocal in making
Yes.
the case for action with respect to climate change. And as you remember, she was invited to the United Nations to give an address to the leaders
Yeah.
of the world, 16-year-old girl from Sweden. We
Mm-hmm.
believe that this is important because either the benefits or the disaster that comes from doing or not doing with respect to climate change will affect the youth. In other words, the youth of our nation will either benefit from our decisions today, and the
Yes.
lack of decisions, they will have the consequences, because climate change is not something that is stopping. It is a continuous, slow, continuous action to which we are contributing by, in many cases, irresponsible behavior. So we've
Mm-hmm.
got to take this seriously, that even if we escape, the next generation will be compromised in their ability to live in a healthy world because of the actions that we did not take. And therefore, the
Exactly.
responsibility is very, very important. With respect to the schools, it is not only about helping them to understand the importance of caring for the environment, but it's also giving them a sense of ownership, a sense of dignity,
Exactly.
a sense of understanding where we are going and where we need to go. Where we need to
Mm-hmm.
go is to create a more sustainable world, a world that we can breathe healthy air, a world where we have sufficient food, or where we can be satisfied that we have taken the decisions necessary to bring peace and prosperity without endangering the environment. And this is where that nexus becomes very important, of balancing our economic activity with the need to preserve the environment. And
Yeah.
so as we go to the school, we go with a simple message. This is your world. This is the world that you will inherit. This is the
Yes.
world that you want to live in, must be a healthy, sustainable world. And
Yeah.
so the schools, in my view, is one of the most important targets, because it is the young people that will change the world.
Yeah, I know that, in my years of working in development and working across projects, um, the one thing that has become very apparent is that when you educate kids about about what's the right thing to do, whether it is from littering to planting trees, they harass their parents about it. So they
Yes.
start to make, so they are also the catalyst for change because they're educated. Yes, the ownership remains with them, but they also are the ones who are going to prod the adults and say, "But mommy, why are you doing this? Mommy, why are we throwing away this? Mommy, why aren't we planting trees?" For me, definitely one of the more enjoyable aspects of the One Tree for Every Bayesian program has been when we go to schools to do tree plantings, and I've literally had like little kids holding on to the tree as if it was a dolly or a toy, and saying, "This is my tree. I want to put this in the ground." And it's really very, very, very heartening. And I mean, I think it's not only just the importance towards the environment, but I feel by encouraging children to understand tree planting within the broader aspect of things, food security, etc., we are moving away from our colonial past and the stigma that has been associated with agriculture, and creating our own food system, being food secure, being stronger as a nation, and that can only come from educating young people. So now that we've talked about why we should be planting trees, we talked about how we're going to be planting trees. What's your strategy, the government strategy for doing the tree planting? And we talked about ownership, particularly on the part of young people. I think everybody who's on board right now wants to know how we can all be a part of this and how we can all have ownership of this. So how can we get involved in this, Dr. Brathwaite?
Well, first of all, going back to the schools, we are engaging all the principals of all schools in Barbados to be
Mm-hmm.
part of this to start with. The
Perfect.
principals have indicated their interest in having various projects, and we started off with St. Lucie. In fact, the Prime Minister started off this project by planting a soursop tree at Darrell Jordan School in St. Lucie. And that was a
Mm-hmm.
signal to us in terms of how we should proceed. And we have been planting trees at schools in St. Lucie, St. Peter. At that time, we were kind of following the regathering format and agenda. Since then, we've planted trees at Erdiston. we teachers training college. We've done trees at St. Giles. We've done trees at schools in St. Thomas. And it's been very rewarding because the children look forward to the activity. They're very enthusiastic, they're motivated, and they're willing to be part of taking care, because not only the planting of the trees, it's taking care of the trees after you have planted them. And I'm sure, Kishi, you
Yeah,
will understand that this is fundamental. A tree is like a baby. It is not
it
going to
is.
grow and do well unless you take care of it.
It
And so
is.
the children are very keen on helping us in taking care of the trees after we have planted them, watering the trees. Sometimes they became a little bit too enthusiastic and they were giving the trees too much water. And we had to say, okay, yes, but water them, but not so much. And so we had to give them the protocol in how it should be done. And that's all part of learning and understanding
Hmm.
the needs of trees. The trees
Yeah,
need nourishment, they need light, they need fertilizer, etc. And that's all part of their education. It's also important for the biology teachers and the teachers of agriculture in the schools to be part of this initiative and to bring the children on board. But we have
yeah.
also engaged the churches, and we've had several church groups working with us to plant trees. Several churches in Barbados have lands around the church that they have not been using, and we are working with them to plant trees in those areas. But one of the things we must not forget in discussing this is our National Botanical Gardens. The National
Hmm.
Botanical Gardens is a very novel project being led again by our Prime Minister, who believes that Barbados should have a space, an open space for recreation and for persons to be able to enjoy the ambiance, the greenery, if I may put it that way, of our country. And so the National Botanical Gardens, 254 acres of land just outside of Commermere, right here in St. Michael, and to a large extent, that has also been a focus of our attention in the tree planting initiative. And several dignitaries from abroad have planted trees in the botanical gardens as a symbol of cooperation, friendship, and support between Barbados and their respective countries. Now, in terms of the individual, if you wish to plant a tree, you can get in touch with the National Conservation Commission and they will make arrangements for you to have a tree. In fact, during this period, based on the trees that we bought with the subvention or the contribution that was made to us, we were able to buy 3,000 trees, which we have distributed to persons around the country,
Excellent.
mainly fruit trees. If you want to get involved, we've given you the numbers, which we're going to share with you, where you can call and make arrangements to have a tree. We'll also give you a guide as to how to plant it and how to take care of it. Because we don't only want you to plant a tree, we want you to plant a tree and take care of it so that the tree can have a successful life. And we
Yeah,
say, don't only plant a tree for the sake of planting a tree, plant a tree also for celebration. Plant a tree for your birthday. Plant a tree for the birthday of your friend. Plant a tree for your relationship. Plant a tree for your marriage. Plant a tree for your children. Plant a tree for your company. Plant a tree for an achievement. Plant a tree when you get your degree. In China, I discovered that students are asked to plant a tree every year once they get into high school. Every year, they must plant a tree. And that tree is a symbol of their growth and development. So as the tree grows, they will grow. And as they
yeah,
grow, the tree grows. And these are very important symbols which contribute to the ambiance and to the development of that sense of responsibility for the environment. So we say
yeah.
plant a tree
Indonesia
to
has a similar
celebrate.
project.
Celebrate your achievements by planting a tree. Just recently, we had a company that was celebrating 125 years of existence, and they came to us and requested that they wanted to plant 125 trees to celebrate 125 years of existence. And we were very happy to partner with them because this is a symbol of their commitment to the environment. Part of the corporate social responsibility of companies, therefore, can be that they promote tree planting in the country in celebration of their own achievements, for their staff. You have 100 people in your staff, you can plant 100 trees, one for each employee. And you make a contribution in the environment, you make a contribution to the project, you make a contribution to your nation in terms of our goal to be more secure, more conscious of our environment.
Yes. It's definitely a very holistic approach. And I mean the role that everybody can play. So you've mentioned the schools, you've mentioned churches, you've mentioned individual persons using tree planting as a milestone. And of course, as you said, we're planting trees, not for them to die, but for them to live. So we're making sure that they have those three critical enabling factors of, enough water, that they are in a place where they're secure. So that, we're not going to have cows or goats just pass through and eat them, as well as protection from people as well to some extent, right? And then of
Yes.
course having some type of supervision for it. And definitely if all of these parties were to play their role, I think we could very quickly get to the numbers that we're looking for, as we go forward. In terms of how we get involved and how we communicate, as Dr. Brathwaite mentioned, we've posted information in the chat in terms of numbers that you can call. But you can also go onto the We Planting Facebook page, which we've also posted in the chat, and look at what the initiative is doing there. And I know I'm not speaking out of turn that as things progress, they will be using these platforms to be able to provide additional information. Dr. Brathwaite, anything additional as to how we can get involved, the role that civil society organizations can play as well?
But let me say that we have been working very strategically with non-governmental organizations like WIRRED and the Walkers Institute, with Future
Yeah,
Center Trust,
Future Center Trust, yes.
with IICA, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture, is a member of our organizing and planning committee, the Food and
Mm-hmm.
Agriculture Organization, UNDP. We've also been working with embassies here. We had a collaboration with Venezuelan embassy that wanted to plant trees on their compound in celebration of a milestone in their history. We have been also working with the diaspora, persons who have come from abroad and have come to us and said they would like to plant a tree in the name of their family, or the name of relatives who are abroad. This we think is very positive, especially in the context of the botanical gardens, where we hope to organize an international park, an area of the
Beautiful.
garden that links to the international community, where
Nice.
embassies and ambassadors can have a tree planted in their name. You no doubt remember that we had the visit of the President of Kenya to Barbados.
Yes.
And in collaboration with our distinguished Prime Minister, he they both went together to the botanical gardens to plant a tree or to plant
Yeah.
several trees. And that too is a part of the dimension of tree planting that strengthens collaboration, international cooperation, and friendship across the seas there. But then would ask, who are planting trees and why is Barbados planting 1 million trees? And I thought, Kiesha, I would take the opportunity to tell our audience who else are planting trees. This is not a singular activity on our part. This is part of a global effort that is
It
taking place
is.
around the world. China is
Mm-hmm.
planting 2.8 billion trees. India is planting 2.5 billion. Ethiopia is planting 1.7 billion. Mexico is planting 789 million. France is planting 720 million. Turkey is planting 716 million. Nigeria is planting 625 million. Kenya is planning 542 million. Egypt is planning 500 million. The United States is planning 315 million. And we're planting 1 million here in Barbados. So
Yeah.
we are part of an international movement, an international development that is critical for our world. This tree planting initiative started in 2006 with the United Nations Environmental Program, indicating that the planting of trees can have a significant impact in removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They estimated that there were 3 trillion trees in the world, and that if we could plant another trillion, that this could make a significant impact in reducing greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, in the atmosphere, and therefore saving our planet and creating a more sustainable world. And so the tree planting project is part of a global initiative that is being fostered around the world. In fact, recently we submitted the project for consideration by the United Nations Framework for Climate Change to be incorporated in the global list of projects. And to the extent that we can demonstrate how much carbon we will sequester in Barbados by using the trees and planting the trees, we will be able to qualify for financial assistance from places like the Green Climate Fund and those global initiatives that have been set up to finance climate initiatives around the world.
Yeah.
And so we are part of a global chain, we're part of the global initiative, and we're working in such a way to ensure that our project remains sustainable even in the face of difficult financial circumstances.
Yeah, Dr. Braffett, it is so refreshing to hear the work that we're doing here in Barbados reframed within the global context and seeing that so many other countries around the world are also stepping up and doing their part to make a change, to make sure that the futures of their countries are secure as well, but also to make global change. Um, and definitely, it's a very strategic approach in terms of financing as well for this initiative, because the one thing that we can both agree on is that tree planting isn't easy, but it also isn't cheap. I know for
Expensive.
those, it is. For those of you who are joining us, we are speaking to Dr. Chelston Brathwaite. He is the person leading the government of Barbados's We Planting initiative, and we are talking about how and why Barbados is planting 1 million trees. And we've looked at how we are framed within the international context of our tree planting initiative, but also how every single member of society, every single organization, every single sector has a role to play with this initiative, and that it is definitely something that is that can be embraced by the collective, and you can do it whether you have large resources or you don't have large resources. If it means just you alone planting your own tree for your special occasion, you can do that. If you're a business and you have larger resources, you can then use that to plant trees too as well. So it's really a very inclusive and holistic approach to tree planting. Now, Dr. Braffett, it seems like the technical difficulties that I had described earlier is catching up with me. So my screen is frozen. I know I can still hear you, so I know we're still live. Um, and I know that we do have questions from the audience, but I won't be able to see the questions from the audience as they come up. I'm trying to get my screen to unfreeze, but I don't want us to finish this conversation prematurely. So I'm going to ask our technical team to bring up the first question. And Dr. Braffett, if you could read the question off the screen and start answering the question, that would be amazing. Hello?
Thank you. I am seeing a question with respect to public edible gardens and food forests in other
Yeah,
countries. And what are we doing or what will we do in the context of these initiatives? Let me
all
begin
right.
by saying that we are convinced that the promotion of backyard gardens and the promotion of community gardens is a viable area of work that can help promote food security in our country. While it is true that our project started off looking at tree and the planting of trees, we have no doubt that with time we can also promote backyard gardens and community gardens as part of the general approach. The other thing is, it is not just about planting trees, but sometimes when you plant trees, within the planting of the trees, you can plant other things. For example, I've been proposing to a colleague that in planting trees in a particular area, when
Mm-hmm.
you space the trees out, you can plant pumpkin, you can plant cucumber, you can plant beans, you can plant other plants in between the trees so that you take advantage of the fact that you are in a planting mode and therefore you can plant other crops within the trees and therefore get the double benefit of planting trees that are more long term and getting the benefit of short term harvests also. And this is very important when you take into consideration that some trees do take a long time to mature. And
Yes.
therefore, in the process, you can kill two birds with one stone, to put it that
Yeah.
way, and obtain a crop, short term crops, while you plant trees. So I agree with the questioner that in a sales sense, yes, we can also
Yeah.
promote backyard gardens, food gardens at the same time that we plant trees. And as I mentioned earlier, one part of our project speaks to trees for food security.
I think a really good element to this too, Dr. Braffett, that we didn't consider in terms of the individual is that you also support local business, because if you're committed to doing a backyard garden, then you're supporting local nurseries, right?
Definitely.
Because you're going to local nurseries. So you're also supporting the local economy, not just with food security, and your own personal household with food security. You're increasing the health of your household because you know what you're growing, you know what you're eating, and it's healthier, right? Um, and you're looking at how you balance your own household's income, but you're also supporting the local economy by supporting local nurseries, and there's several of them across the island, several small nurseries that are family run, and larger nurseries. We have a nursery at Walker's too as well that has plants for sale, but I know that there's several nurseries across the island that would benefit very greatly from more people planting home gardens.
I think
But
we
Dr.
need to
Braff,
look at employment opportunities also coming out of trees,
yes.
opportunities for management of orchards, management of trees, the production of seedlings. These are all opportunities that can come out of the production of trees. And
Yes.
over time, I'm sure that you will see the opportunity for the production of tropical fruit juices, even even medicinal herbs. I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
moringa, but there are also a
Yes.
number of trees that are used to produce tea, soursop,
Yes.
for example, which we now
Mm-hmm.
know is a very important tree because it's been shown that the leaves can produce elements that are anti-cancer in their properties. So there are a
I
lot
think
of
so
other
too.
aspects of trees that we need to consider.
Yeah. I mean, we've had on our living room sessions, Dr. Peter, and we were able to
Excuse me.
discuss at
Yes.
length how so many of the indigenous trees and plants that we have here in Barbados have so much medicinal value, and also could be used for teas too, as well as you mentioned. And so it's that whole element of not just the planting of the trees, so the economic activity, but there's also that added value products that the produce of the trees bring that also create employment, that also create opportunities for individuals. I still can't see the screen, Dr. Braffett, so I'm going to call on you again, and I'm asking the team on the back end to put up the another question from the audience. And Dr. Braffett, if you can read that question.
So will our national and community parks be planted with fruiting trees and plants to encourage more use? Definitely. This is part of our plan. And we hope to work with the communities to identify areas for planting trees. One of the challenges we have in Barbados is that a significant amount of our lands are in private hands. They're not a lot of public lands. And therefore, this
Yes.
is why we have to work with the private sector and with individuals and with communities to identify areas for planting trees. And clearly, to the extent that we are aware of communities interested in developing parks or fruit orchards, as the case may be, we are willing to do so. At the end of the day, we believe that this project is going to demonstrate a financial return over and above the investment that is being made. Because out of the project, we will see job opportunities and returns that are not now calculated in terms of herbal medicines, herbal teas, herbal creams, herbal oils. And there's one
Yes.
thing that I have not dealt with, which I should deal with, that is the
Mm-hmm.
relationship between this project and tourism. To the
Yes.
extent that we plant trees, to the extent that we develop the ecosystems of our country, to the extent that we encourage the birds and the bees and the butterflies to be able to enjoy their own existence, is the extent to which we create ecosystem that the tourists can enjoy. A
Yes.
significant amount of tourists today are not just looking for the sea and the sand, they're
That's
also
very
looking
true.
for an experience that is linked to what is called ecotourism. And
Yes.
ecotourism is becoming a very important part of the tourism market today, where people are coming to our countries to understand the fauna and the flora, to see the bees, the birds, and the butterflies. And we must encourage, therefore, the repopulation of our gullies and our rural areas with trees that encourage these organisms and these animals to be there so that we can encourage our tourists to take another experience away from the sun and the sea. This is
Yes.
part
We're
of an
definitely.
ecotourism initiative that can be built on the back of this tree planting program.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a more discerning tourist developing where, there's also the socially conscious aspect of it. So there's also the tourist who wants to give back. There's also the tourist who wants to contribute to where they're traveling. And then there's also the tourist who wants to offset their carbon footprint of travel, right?
Yes,
And so this is not only just something that the airlines can assist passengers in doing, but as passengers touch base here in Barbados, that is definitely something that that we can be assisting them with by allowing them to participate in our activities and tree planting, contributing towards our tree planting activities.
yeah,
And allowing them to fulfill that socially conscious aspect of their travel. And you're so right. Many of the I think you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the botanical gardens, to have that amazing green space. There's so many countries where around the world where people are doing forest bathing, right? I know that Cocoa Hill Forest, they encourage their visitors to come and do forest bathing. And it's really such a stress relieving activity where you allow nature to just kind of take over. The air is fresher, the place is cooler. And you can actually have mental health benefits from that type of activity as well.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
I would
Well,
also
sorry, go ahead.
I would also like to mention, especially for international audience, that we are promoting an adopt a tree program so that if you live outside of Barbados, you can adopt a tree in Barbados. You can have a tree planted for you in the botanical gardens. We will look after that tree for you. We'll send you pictures of the tree. We'll give you a progress report on the development of the tree for a small fee, which we can communicate with you through the internet. But the Adopt a Tree program is to allow persons who love Barbados, nationals, members of the diaspora, to have a tree in Barbados. Could be a family tree that you plant for your family. It could be just a personal tree, but we can work with you to have a tree planted in Barbados, even if you are over and away, and then you can come to Barbados and look for your tree.
Yeah, that is absolutely, absolutely awesome. And so before we wrap up, because we're coming to the top of the hour, I must say, thank you so much, Dr. Brathwaite, for spending the time with us today, shedding light on the tree planting initiative, and shedding light on the direction that the tree planting initiative is taking. But I think more importantly, the reason why. I think once people understand the reason why something is happening, and they understand very clearly the role that they can play, buy-in starts to happen after there. So we're really excited. WIRRED is an organization through the One Tree for Every Bajan program is supporting the government of Barbados 100% with the trees that we plant. And we intend to continue supporting this initiative because it is not only globally relevant and Barbados relevant, but it is people relevant. And it is definitely, for me, one of the most important things that we need to do because of its far-reaching implications across so many different sectors and its ability to have such positive impact, not only now, but into the future. I definitely think that this is something that we should all be willing to get on board with in some shape or fashion. So, Dr. Brathwaite, before we close, is there anything that you would like to leave, any closing remarks that you would like to leave with the audience?
I would like to thank all those who have collaborated with us in this initiative. The Ministry of the Environment, the National Beautification, the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, the various institutions, the Walker's Institute, Future Center Trust, EECA, FAO, UNDP, the schools around the country, the churches, the various groups. When we had our inaugural planting in St. Lucie, we had
Mm-hmm.
the defense force and the police service and the youth
Yeah.
groups came and helped us in that regard. Members of the press came. We would like to thank GIS for the work that they have done. I'd like to thank my staff who work with me in this regard. And I would like to thank the government of Barbados and the Prime Minister in particular for her vision, her initiative,
Yes.
and her commitment to making our environment a better place for this and the next generations to come.
Yes.
Thank you very
Excellent.
kindly for the opportunity to be part of your show today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Dr. Brathwaite. We look forward to seeing what's next. As we close off, for those of you who might have joined us halfway, we were speaking to Dr. Brathwaite. It was certainly an enlightening and enjoyable discussion as he explained why Barbados is planting 1 million trees and how we're going to go about doing it. To our audience who might have missed any part of today's session, you can catch it later on WIRRED's YouTube channel. Remember, it's as easy as click and subscribe. And next week, Jen and I are switching things up a bit. Next week, Tuesday, I will be talking to Barney Gibbs of the Future Center Trust, whom Dr. Brathwaite would have mentioned in our discussion about the Barbados Trailway. And then on Thursday, Jen, CPRI's Jen Ward Clark will be talking to Nia Talbot from the British Virgin Islands about how small farms can withstand climate change and the consequences of climate change, such as hurricanes. So see you next week. We really look forward to having you. And thanks for bearing with us through our technical difficulties. We look forward to seeing you next week.